I'm going to be looking at the second half of Matthew 24. I want to give I'll show my cards now, a partial preterist viewpoint on Matthew 24. Futurist would be the perspective that all of it is yet to be fulfilled. A full preterist viewpoint would be to say that all biblical prophecy, including Matthew 24, all of them were fulfilled in 70 AD at the destruction of the temple. That might sound a little bit weird to you. They will say that it was fulfilled symbolically. What I'm attempting to do in this is not only, for those of you who don't care about other viewpoints and just want to know what the text says, or at least what I think it says, I'm going to be doing that, but I'm going to be somewhat responding to both the futurist and the full preterist viewpoints and showing how I think the futurist perspective is hard to come by because of certain time-sensitive phrases in Matthew 24. But then I'm also going to be responding to the full preterist perspective by differentiating between the second coming of Christ and the events surrounding the temple. And I think that there can be a differentiation made in that passage itself. Now, there are some partial preterists who take all of Matthew 24 and even 25 to be more or less speaking about Jesus coming on judgment against Jerusalem, but they will still hold to the crucial orthodox belief that Jesus is coming again in the future. I don't think that you actually have to hold a all or nothing perspective on Matthew 24. I think that there is a case to be made for there being talk about Jesus coming in judgment against Jerusalem, but then Jesus going on to talk about his actual bodily return in the future, which is something different to whatever happened in 70 AD. That's a lot as we go through Matthew 24 and other helpful passages. Ultimately, I want to expound the text so that you can better understand exactly what Jesus is saying here. And if nothing else, it might give you a little bit of something just to chew on. So let's get into it. All right, here we go. Matthew 24, first 4 verses. Now, these are the first 4 verses of the Olivet Discourse found in Matthew's Gospel as well as Mark and Luke's, but we're just going to be looking mostly at Matthew's account today. And before we get into what I want to talk about, we need to have an understanding of the context from which Jesus gives his discourse about the destruction of the temple, end of the age, all of that. So, verse 1, Jesus left the temple and was going away, when his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. But he answered them, "You see all these, do you not? Truly I say to you," get this, "there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." In short, the temple's going to be destroyed. Now, this is a bombshell for the disciples. I just want to put that out there. This is a bombshell. The temple is where God dwelt among his people. Jesus is saying it's going to be destroyed. That would have been difficult to swallow for the disciples. And as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" All right. So I want you to notice here, the disciples ask 3 or maybe 2 questions, at least 2 questions here. When will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? This "and" here sort of means it seems like the disciples are trying to join these two things together. And I'm sure that's what they expect, that the next time Jesus returns, the age will end, right? But they probably, in their mind, are also linking these two things as well. They probably expect these two things are the same event, but they are two different ones, and Jesus is going to talk about that. Now, what are these things? These things is the destruction of the temple Jesus talked about. So primarily, the first question the disciples have asked is about the destruction of the temple, these things. And they ask, what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? And Jesus answered them, see that no one leads you astray. And then, ... He goes on for the next half a chapter, talking about all these different signs and happenings that will occur before these things. Okay? And I'm not going to go into that today, but that's what Jesus does. And then I'm going to come over now to Matthew 24, verse 24 to 36. And this is coming to the end of when Jesus is talking about the signs of when the temple will be destroyed. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. So if they say to you, look, he is in the wilderness, do not go out. If they say, look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. All right, now here's the important part. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. So Jesus has talked about the temple, right? So all that's above here, he's talking about temple destruction. Okay? And then he's prophesying that people will be saying, hey, look, Jesus returned. Right? So around the time of the temple, people will be saying, hey, look, Jesus has returned. And Jesus is saying, don't believe them. If they say that, don't believe them. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. What does that mean? No one is going to have to be told Jesus returned. Everyone's going to know that Jesus returned. Comes from the east, shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. You are not going to have to go and tell people Jesus returned. Everyone on earth is going to know. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. And that can be a reference to a great many things. I won't go into what the possibilities are. So we're going to come down here now. And this is where things start to get a little bit tricky. So we're just going to go slow and see how we go. Immediately after the tribulation of those days. All right, so first of all, we've got a time period. What's the time period? Immediately after the tribulation, which Jesus has just talked about, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. All right. This whole section here. Many read this and they take this to be a great universal cosmic destruction. All right. I do not think that that's the case. First of all, the reason is because Jesus says that this here will occur immediately after the tribulation of those days. This will occur. Now, if this tribulation, right, Jesus is talking about the destruction of the temple, is he not? So this tribulation occurred right before the temple got destroyed. Right after that tribulation, this occurs. Clearly, the whole universe did not end in AD 70 when the temple was destroyed. Right? And the temple was destroyed in AD 70. That's what Jesus is talking about. So what does this mean? In the Old Testament, language such as this: sun will be darkened, moon will not give its light, stars will fall from heavens. This sort of language is used to do with cities which God comes to in judgment. In the prophets, language such as this is used to describe God coming in judgment against a city. And this phrase here, powers of the heavens will be shaken, likely refers to in the Bible, Satan is referred to as the prince of the air, right? Powers of the heavens likely refers to the demonic powers or satanic powers will be completely overcome. That's my theory, at least, for what this means. Why? I'll explain in a bit once you look at this verse here, because this verse 30 here is crucial. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man. And then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. All right. Again, this certainly sounds like the physical bodily return of Jesus Christ. All right. This sounds like the second coming. Why is it not? Why do we know that this isn't the second coming? I've talked about why before, because I think Jesus is referring to the temple. But there's another, possibly even bigger reason. And it's down here in verse 34. Right here, verse 34. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. This is our time frame for all that Jesus has said prior to this. This generation will not pass away until all these things take place. There's the tribulation, which he talked about up here. And immediately after that, this happens. So we have a time frame. So how do we make sense of this without being, there's a movement out there called full preterism, which does state that the second coming happened in AD 70, that it was symbolic. And I'll get to why that is wrong. But how do we not come to that conclusion then? Because this passage here, I do not believe is talking about the second coming. Okay, so this whole passage not the second coming. Well, what is it? It is the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. The destruction of Jerusalem was a absolute massive, dare I say, earth-shattering event. Not only in a theological sense, because Jerusalem is a incredibly important city. At least it was in the Old Testament. And if you read about the first time it was destroyed, whole books were written to lament its destruction. And it's happened again here. But even just from a more historical point of view, the destruction of the temple was absolutely horrid. There was a death toll that was just absolutely massive. Massive death toll. And when you read the accounts of people like Josephus, who wrote about it, they talk about the city was absolutely annihilated. There was no stone left on top of each other, just as Jesus said. But the destruction carries with it as well a theological significance. Christ coming in judgment against the city of Jerusalem demonstrates his kingship and dominion over the world. That's, in short, that's what this is talking about, and I'll explain why again, but I'm just trying to lay a bit of groundwork, okay? Again, verse 29, this is judgment language. When God comes in judgment against a city, this is judgment language. And why? Why did Jesus come in judgment? Because the Jews rejected Jesus as Messiah, and that is what Jesus prophesied would happen in other places. All right, back to the text, verse 30. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. All right, let's stop there. What's the sign of the Son of Man? First thing to know about the sign of the Son of Man is that it's not the Son of Man. The Son of Man does not appear in the heaven. The sign of the Son of Man appears. Now, what is the sign? My theory about the sign is that it is the destruction of the temple, that this is the sign of the Son of Man. Obviously, heaven here would have to be all-encompassing. But I want to take you real quick, just to help understand this passage, to Matthew 26. This is a couple chapters later when Jesus is on trial. The high priest said to him, this is Jesus, right? I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus said to him, you have said so, but I tell you now. All right, here we go. From now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. What? I don't think the high priest from this point on had a constant vision of Jesus in heaven. No, what Jesus is saying is from now on, you will see the effects, you will see the evidence, you will see that the Son of Man is seated at the right hand of power. And what's this? Coming on the clouds of heaven. How do we understand that? Even if we go back here. It says, see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with great power, with power and great glory. How do we understand that? I'll promise I'll put all this together, but I'm just having to get all the helpful information out there. Final bit of information, possibly the most important. Daniel 7, verse 13 to 14. This is Daniel's vision of the Son of Man. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a Son of Man, who is Jesus. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. This, what does this mean? Jesus is king. That's what it means. Jesus is king. Jesus reigns. And notice here, it says, behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a Son of Man. With the clouds of heaven. And he came to the Ancient of Days. Right? Coming on the clouds of heaven is not coming to earth. That's coming to God. So Jesus comes on the clouds of heaven to God and is made king. So back here, I think Jesus is referencing that passage in Daniel saying, look, you will see that me who calls myself the Son of Man, you will see me as king because you will see the evidence that this is me. You will see the evidence of this, that I reign supreme. And what's the evidence that he reigns supreme? What's the immediate evidence? The destruction of the temple, destruction of Jerusalem, Christ coming in judgment. You might say that the first act Jesus does as king is come in judgment against Jerusalem. So, here in heaven, the sign of the Son of Man, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. Now, the word earth here can also mean land, okay? So, all the tribes of the land will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. People will see Christ, that people will see that Christ reigns. And he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Now, this trumpet call. In the Bible, when it talks about the resurrection of the dead, that talks about there being a trumpet. Okay, I do not think that this trumpet is that trumpet. Okay, I think this is different. Trumpets, or I mean, trumpets can mean many different things. In this case, I think that the trumpet call is a trumpet call of commission, similar to the Great Commission. The temple is now destroyed. Israel has been left in ruins. The call is now go into all the world. Now, this word angels in the Greek, angels can mean the word for angel literally just means messenger. And so this could be referring to the messengers of the gospel, or it could mean just the supernatural protection that goes with the gospel proclamation. But regardless, there is a trumpet call, and people are sent out to gather the elect of God. Gather the elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. The whole world is now going to hear the gospel. All right. Now that's 29 to 30. That's probably the hardest one, because at face value, it's very easy to, I think, misinterpret. But this is what I think the passage means. Verse 32 now. From the fig tree learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. In other words, when you see the signs, you know the next event is about to happen. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near, at the very gates. So you can tell by the signs what's going to be happening next. And then he says, truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. All right, this is one of the main reasons I hold to the view I do. It's because I don't see a way of getting around this passage. In Jewish culture, a generation equaled 40 years. And it was a little bit less than 40 years after Jesus said these words that the temple got destroyed. And he says, all these things, including this passage up here, which is why I don't believe that this is referring to the physical, bodily second coming of Jesus. But then the question is, will there be a physical second coming of Jesus? Well, the answer is yes. And here's why. Verse 37. But concerning that I missed a verse. Verse 35. This is important. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Heaven and earth will pass away. Now that sounds cosmic. There will be an actual end of the world. And concerning that day, an hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. Now let's just stop there. Jesus has just said that immediately after the tribulation, there will be this whole event of the Son of Man coming in judgment. But now down here, he says, concerning that day and hour, no one knows. Up here, from the fig tree learn its lesson. As soon as the branch becomes tender and puts its leaves out, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near at the very gates. But now down here, it talks about a day, an hour, no one knows. Now, maybe you can stretch it to say that this too is talking about the coming of Christ in judgment. But when it says here, that day, what is Jesus referring to? I think that there's a strong case to be made that when Jesus says that day, he is referring to not his coming in judgment, but his actual second coming. Because if you look back at the first verses, the disciples ask two questions. One, when will these things be? Two, what will be the sign of your coming? And notice how they say, what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Now, I feel like Jesus is just making the point here. Concerning that day or hour, no one knows. In other words, disciples have asked for a sign. Jesus says, you're not going to get a sign. I'm going to give you the signs about the destruction of the temple, but my second coming? No. You won't know when I return. There won't be this big obvious sign of when I'll return. How do we know? For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. The days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. The people in Noah's day got no warning when the flood came. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage, etc., until the day when Noah entered the ark, and they were unaware until the flood came and swept all of them away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. Jesus will come without warning. We will not be able to have a look at our prophetic calendar and be like, aha, he's coming in the next 3 years, 5 years, 6 months. Those who do that have missed what Jesus has said here. Okay? Concerning that day, no one knows. And in fact, these two ideas here could well be connected. Heaven and earth will pass away. My words will never pass away. Concerning that day, when heaven and earth passes away, no one knows. And it's important to know as well, when we look at the passages in Mark and Luke where the Olivet Discourse is discussed, there are obvious differences about what Jesus says. Some things are omitted, some things are added in. I think that it would be unwise to assume that this is just a perfect transcript of the discussion. I think it's likely that there are interjections that the disciples make, other things Jesus goes on to talk about, which some record, some omit. And the reason I bring that up is just to say, even though there doesn't seem to be much of a subject break between Jesus coming on the temple versus Jesus coming in his proper second coming, just because there isn't an obvious change in subject doesn't mean that there isn't a change of subject. Now, we'd have to have a pretty good case to infer that there's a change of subject here. But I think that I've done that, showing that the description Jesus gives for that day is very different to the description he gives for these, all these events, right? One seems to be secret, without warning, and up here, obvious. Jesus comes without warning, and it's obvious that he comes. As the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. It will be sudden like lightning, and it will be obvious. From the east to the west. This, however, for someone to say that this was the supposed second coming of Christ, well, that's not obvious. We saw a city being destroyed, yeah, that's obvious, but Jesus is saying that people will be claiming the Messiah is back on earth bodily. And he says, if people say to you, look, Jesus is back, don't believe them. Because you will not need to have someone tell you when Jesus is back. It will be obvious. It was not obvious to the early church that Jesus had come back at this moment. And so that's why I think that this whole passage here is talking about the second coming. Second coming. While this passage up here is not the second coming, is the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. All right. Well, that is Matthew 24, verse 24 to 39. Probably the hardest part of Matthew 24 to interpret. So the whole thing is an exercise, many different perspectives. This is just a perspective. It's one that I think makes most sense, and even if you disagree, I hope that it has helped to give you a better understanding of how to make sense of clear, time-sensitive phrases in this passage without compromising the crucial Orthodox belief that Jesus is in fact coming again bodily in the future.